Welcome to This Week in Heresy, episode 49, Queering the Conversation and Planting Seeds, with our guest via Skype, Monica Joy Cross. Hi, Monica. Welcome to This Week in Heresy.
Hi, Gina.
So for those who don't know you, could you introduce yourself and talk a bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay, my name is Monica Cross. I am from LA originally, and not Lower Alabama, but LA. A graduate of PSR and Starr King. I have degrees in Divinity and also a degree in social change and transformation from Starr King School for the Ministry. I am transgender, and that's my work. Transgender, transforming minds and hearts and souls, which is really difficult work.
Absolutely. I mean, I know quite a few folks like you who are priests and pastors and ministers and doing that same work, and it's not easy stuff.
No, it's really difficult work because a lot of folks are stubborn to change. They're stubborn. They're just stubborn. They don't want to change. But what helps is just being authentic. Just being authentic and being honest in who you are and what you do, and not hiding out.
And are you a minister in the Disciples these days, or are you working towards it?
Well, I'm actually on track for ordination in the DOC. It's kind of funny because I have two churches now in the DOC that I work in, Tapestry Ministries, which you know about, and also First Christian Church of Oakland.
Oh, wow.
And that's a new one because since the former minister left for a different job, I kind of facilitate that congregation now. So I do the bulletins, I do everything the pastor does, I do it.
Wow.
Well, that happened in the last 3 weeks. So I got two churches now that I work with.
My goodness, you've been busy.
Yeah. But, and it's kind of funny because on the one hand, the DOC is still trying to understand what a transgender person is, let alone being black. How about being transgender?
Right.
And so they're really like, okay, well, how do we work this? Because they pretty much come from a very white supremacist kind of view, which is not a problem. Just that's where they are. So then when I come along, they have a problem trying to understand what that means. So it's almost like anything, when something new comes in, there's a process of trying to understand what it's about.
Right.
But in the meantime, I got two churches.
Wow. So, since you're in a primarily white denomination and working in these churches, we're recording this the day after the shooting in Charleston. What do you do at times like this? Well, how do you help your congregation work through this?
Well, creating those spaces for conversation. So the transgender person who's a minister,
right?
It is a fantastic opportunity to create that space of conversation. Because for a long time, it's been about what I would call the white imagination, the white corporate imagination, and how everything looking from that point of view. But when a person, I call it critical difference. I say critical difference to get it beyond just transgender, to get almost to queer space, so that everything is queered. So, as a good example, so from Caitlin, last week, 2 weeks ago, whatever.
Right.
And then we get to the woman this week who is white, at least according to, she's white, but she identified her or whatever is black.
Oh, Rachel Dolezal.
Yeah. And then we get to this present moment.
Right.
And so when things get really dislodged from white supremacy, everything is off.
Right.
And so then everything started being really queered. So when I view like Rachel Dolezal, if she was able to articulate it, she could have said, well, I'm queering race. Now that gets kind of complicated. So on the one hand, it could be an opportunity to break away from the white supremacy, which everybody we want to break from. Or it could be, so it's kind of a delicate space, but it can be used just like the issue of being transgender in white space can be used to give access to a broader understanding beyond just the construct of race or gender or sexuality. Yeah, that makes sense.
Absolutely. I mean, my wife and I were talking about that this morning, how, you know, race is just such a very odd topic, especially in America. Like she's from the UK, so really understanding just how deep the racism goes in America for her is a very weird thing to contemplate, and she didn't really understand it until just a few years ago. Yeah, I mean, race is part of our DNA. I mean, it's unfortunate, but it's I mean, and race is much more of an economic construct than anything else. I mean, because the whole issue of slavery, the whole issue of just, you know, I mean, it's a matter of economics. And so almost today I went on Facebook and I said, maybe we need to reconstitute the United States, maybe, you know, a time to reconstitute what we are, because it's not working. Yeah. I know it might be kind of really weird out there to reconstitute but maybe that's what needs to happen long term, so we can get beyond this idea of race and what it means. You know, I can't find myself disagreeing with you, because, you know, the document, the Constitution itself is over 200 years old, right? Yeah. And, you know, we're living in a modern time, and while some of the concepts in the Constitution are really valid, and you know, in my study of history, because, you know, I grew up in the New England area, so I was steeped in American history, right, and politics and all that. You know, they made the Constitution in such a way that we could revise if we needed to, and we just don't take advantage of that. And, you know, sometimes we need to have, you know, I've seen it in other documents before, you know, like I used to work at quality control. Sometimes you have to sit down and do a 2.0, right? Yeah. Do a reboot. Yeah, exactly. And I know it may not be the popular thing on the more centrist folks, but I think that's what needs to happen long term, to reconstitute the United States in a different form. Yeah. You know, and it doesn't mean you won't have issues of power and all these other things. But I think once folks get beyond their need to have privilege, and that goes across the board, then we can have a time of reconstitution to where we might have actually a better. It would definitely be different. It would definitely be a different country. Right. Especially if, you know, we're able to take in all of our differences and see them as just differences and not, you know, that difference is bad. Right, exactly. And, you know, and then part of the challenge also is, so like what happened in South Carolina, there's a fear that, you know, what if we reconstitute or we change things, which is going on now in a sense, that white men in particular will lose their power, will lose whatever, you know. But then I do challenge white men and some other folks to say, you know, what's more important, your privilege or the country? Right. You know, I mean, it comes down to that conversation, you know. So I know that becomes a difficult conversation. You know, do I need to give my privilege up? And that goes, whatever you fall on the spectrum, there's a privilege there somewhere. Absolutely. And so how do we do that? You know, even if you're black and we have paid the price of admission to be black, there's still a certain privilege in that. So right. So how do we get beyond, well, I got privilege in my narrative. Well, the country needs to be reconstituted. Anyway, don't get me going off, because that's kind of right. Well, you know, that's kind of okay. That's kind of how these interviews work. But, you know, I'm curious as to how you answer this question, because, you know, you see it on the internet a lot where, you know, there's white men, especially poor white men, but poor white folks in general are like, well, I have no privileges, blah, 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 because, you know, I didn't grow up with the silver spoon in my mouth, blah, blah, blah. You know, how do you answer that? How would you answer that?
Well, it's interesting. I did a sermon on global warming one day at my church at Tapestry. And I said the word white supremacy. And this one man, I think he's in his 60s, 70s. And he said, what do you mean white? I'm not a white supremacist. And I had to really explain to him that it was not a matter of a personal agency. It was more of a structural thing. It's about the structure. Right. And once I explained to him that it was about the structure and not about his particular situation, then he was able to say, oh, okay, well, I think I got it. And it depends also how enlightened the white person is. Because so I know this one guy I work with at Greenpeace. Mm-hmm. He is radical. He said, I know my privilege. I know I know I got privilege within the structure. So I'm going to step back. And that's what he did. So a lot of it depends on the person. But you're really getting people to see beyond. So yeah, you have your personal needs. Yes, you have to eat. Yeah, you are poor, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not about your personal thing, but it's about the structure by which we function. What creates these things, you know. But it's also a matter of getting black folks to look beyond that structure too. Because a lot of black folks are comfortable with the structure the way it is. They don't want to move.
Really?
Yes. You know, they don't want to move. Once you get outside of the more progressive folks who are black African American, and you get to the ones that live in the poverty and stuff, we've accepted that's just the way it is. It's the same thing. It's the same stuff. And so I will find myself going sometimes, in some days, engaging both in the conversation to see that, no, it's not about you, it's about the structure.
Right.
And a lot of the black folks say, well, it's too big for me. I can't do nothing about it. That's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. And then I get the white person saying, well, I'm not going to give it up because that's not my problem. So you have both groups like that.
Right. And I bet you plenty of white folks who are enlightened are like, this is way too big for me. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. I haven't encountered them yet, but I know they're there.
Yeah.
It's too big, you know. But what I do say to folks is do your part. You don't have to eat the whole pie. Just do what you can do. You know, if it means going to a city council, for example, housing issues and gentrification.
Right, which is huge in San Francisco right now.
Yeah, huge. And people say, well, I don't know what to do. I said, well, just go to a city council meeting. You know, or if you need a protest, do something that really engages the injustice. You know, so I mean, some folks are scared to do it. They say, Monica, you can do it. I can't do that. Yeah. But, so I mean.
I get that too.
Yeah. I mean, it's complex. It's a construct. But you can do your part. The person can do their part. You know, yeah. And then of course, and you can do it by writing, having a blog, you know, social media is great for getting your voice heard. Mm-hmm. You know, and so for me, like with social media, Facebook, my blog site, it's about building critical mass. And so I know that a lot of folks don't get it, but they have to be continually engaged in the process. So you do it through a blog, through writing, through speaking, through being present. Mm-hmm. you know.
Doing anything that's in your power and ability to do. That's how I usually tell people. It's like, you know, even if it's the little things. I mean,
just do it, by even protesting. I was out there when I had that last protest in Oakland about Black Lives Matter.
Right.
I was out doing that stuff, got back to the house, started writing about it and stuff. But I do believe social transformation starts with each of us.
Right.
It's not about one particular person being the Jesus or the Buddha or whatever, but it's each of us doing our part and our share to transform the country.
Right. Absolutely. And, and I like to tell people, and this is a thing that I've talked about a lot on this show, even if you're like making cookies for the people that are out there doing the work, doing the protests in the streets, if like you're making cookies or getting them dinner, that's helping.
Yeah. And I do want to lift up prayer also. Prayer gets kind of marginalized sometimes because it's not like a really big activity.
Yeah.
But what happened today shows the danger of prayer. So the guy, he doesn't go on a regular church service. No, he goes where they're praying.
Right.
Because at some point, I think people have to realize that prayer is a very powerful activity to do.
Absolutely.
So I mean, I don't think it was an error to attack the church during prayer time. A lot of folks say it's very intentional that he went to that particular church. Historic church, all 1816,
right.
Involved in the civil rights movement.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Oh, and I said around Juneteenth.
Yeah. So it's no mistake. And then attack right during prayer time. So prayer and even meditation are critical as far as social transformation goes.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm pretty much invested in prayer. I got a thing called Global Prayer Network, which you might be on, I think.
I think so. Yeah.
Global Prayer Network, and trying to create that space of different consciousness so that we know we're not in this by ourselves. We look pretty ugly sometimes, but you're not by yourself. That you have a whole cast of prayer warriors along with the holy God. How you want to describe the holy in this thing with us.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, prayer, like you said, prayer is really powerful, and I consider it an act of magic.
Yeah.
And because you're moving that energy from one place to another, and hopefully for change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. When I first came out in Virginia.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I was in the Navy, and I came out in the early 90s, but I was still in the Navy, so I was living across the water from Norfolk, Virginia. It's like you work in San Francisco and you live in Oakland. Right. And when I came, I didn't know what to do. And I had gone to the Portsmouth Naval Hospital and said, I'm gay. The guy said, okay, no problem. Come on in, we got you, no problem. My brother's gay. They sent me back to the ship. If I said I was transgender, that'd been a different story.
Right.
But what I had to do is I had to go see my therapist, and my therapist was a pagan.
Oh, wow.
The church couldn't help me, but the pagan therapist helped me out. I mean, she really helped me out, right? And I got involved in more of a Middle Earth, Native American type of religion, but through those areas, I was able to gain some understanding outside of what the white imagination put in place to who I was. And so I'm clear that if it weren't for those activities of decolonization, I don't know where I'd be at, to tell you the truth. So then it puts a different spin on how I move in the world. The person who prays and meditates and who moves in an inclusive way me out a whole lot of different things. But that's another component of breaking the bondage of white supremacy, is getting beyond just purely Christian ideals.
Right.
And that's another hard thing to do because there's so much wrapped into it. But it's just empire. But yeah, so I'm going to go off here. Anyway.
Go for it. I don't mind.
So a lot of it is being able to be actually have your mind liberated from the white imagination. And that goes beyond just particular color per se. It's a mindset. It's a colonizing mindset that keeps people doing what they do. So as an example, that's why when the Pope puts the encyclical out about climate change, he's chewed up. Mm-hmm. Because everybody's been educated thinking white ways of being. White corporate ways of being, consumerism and stuff. The Pope comes along and says, that's not right, you're destroying the planet. And then folks go off.
Yeah.
And so it's about liberating ourselves, liberating our minds from the colonization of the last 500 years. But that compels me to do what I do. Mm-hmm. Like yourself, where you go out and you're open and honest and authentic with who you are. Because then you got to stop and think.
Right.
Hey, wait a minute.
Yeah, they scratch the head.
Yeah. Then they have to stop and think, okay, what's going on? Okay, I don't get it. And so then when you have stuff like Caitlin coming out, which is a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
When you have stuff like Rachel Dolezal come out, mm-hmm. and stuff like this, people have to think. And I've heard on the radio, one woman said, she said, man, men trying to be women and women trying to be men and folks trying to deny their color. I don't know what I'm going to do. she was just frustrated.
Yeah.
So, but this is an opportunity to really get beyond these constructs if we take the opportunity to do it.
Right.
Yeah. So
and it's hard. And it's hard, too, because we have centuries of stuff that's just been told to us, mm-hmm. that we're supposed to take as the way the world works.
Yeah.
That just doesn't go away overnight.
No, it's a process. I mean, it's a daily process of, I would say, being authentic. Mm-hmm. And I have to add life affirming to that. Authenticity, at least to me, should be life affirming.
Yes.
Because you do have folks who say authenticity is, well, I feel like killing somebody. So you have to really kind of really put context around it. But for me, and it's for me, the transgender person, acknowledging all of who I am, the maleness part of me as well as the feminine part of me, that's a space to really cause question and cause critique, to cause a challenge to the mindset. Not for folks who are progressive, because that's if I'm going to a church that's progressive and that's open already to transgender folks, either be it Refuge or Tapestry, well, that's cool, that's great, but that's the family.
Yeah.
The real work is being done in full like the DOC and other places who don't have that consciousness yet. That's where the work has to be done. Mm-hmm. Or going to Capitol Hill or different spaces to where, okay, this is where the work needs to be done.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I mean, it is hard work and it is a calling because not everybody's called to do this. But at the same time, hey, all I got is time. So do what you can do. And then I think another part is, in the Christian context, they talk about the great cloud of witnesses. Mm-hmm. And so you realize that you go all the way back to Frederick Douglass, at least in the U.S. context. You go back to Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, all those folks, Dorothy Day, and then you take those folks with you when you do these things, because they've been doing the work already. They've already salted the ground, so you just continue the work they were doing.
Right.
So you're really not by yourself. I had an opportunity to go to Frederick Douglass's house when I lived in D.C.
Oh, wow.
Oh, man, he was nice house. I gotta admit, I could live there. It was really cool, but all the work he had done, mm-hmm. From slavery, escaping slavery. I mean, it was just an experience to really see that. And then from there, you go to Sojourner Truth's place, or you go to the various areas. And then I had a chance to go to Martin Luther King's house in Atlanta. And he had the same tub I did when I was a kid. So you realize that you're not on this journey by yourself. The work you do as a transgender person, or I don't know, just critical difference. The work that we do beyond the norm is significant, and it's a certain trajectory that's going.
Right.
So that's a big comfort for me, actually, knowing the history of it. Yeah.
Well, I think it's important to really know the history, because, you know, if you don't know it, you can't put things into context, and you can't really relate. And it's, you know, the thing that's important to me, and part of the reason why I do this podcast, is that, you know, the stories of the people that I interview, to me, are important because it's a part of our current history.
Yeah.
I believe the only way you can really relate to people is to learn their stories and have empathy, and to really feel what they're feeling, to hear what they've gone through. Yeah. And so, you know, they're important. So knowing, it really struck me when you were talking about Martin Luther King's bathtub. And it's like, you know, he was just as human as you are and as I am.
Yeah.
And that's a really important concept. And I don't think a lot of people really understand that relating that way is really extremely important.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I mean, we're all interconnected beyond just your physical life, you know what I mean?
Right.
Because you take all that stuff with you. So, like, example, when I have to deliver a paper in Northampton, a place called Starr Island. It's like a UCC, UU kind of place.
Oh, right, yeah.
I don't know if you ever heard of it before, called Starr Island.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. And so the topic is queer theory and liberation, queer theory and queer theology. And we're using Judith Butler and Michelle Foucault as the foundational topics. Mm-hmm. And so, like, they want to know, well, how does a transgender person use queer? how do I do that? How do I utilize queer in my daily life? Well, for me, queer is embracing all of who you are. Mm-hmm. Every last bit, the idiosyncrasies, the whatever you might call mistakes, all those kind of things, embracing all of it. And not being ashamed to embrace all of it. Because you realize that as I embrace all of it, I realize that each person, so as we have this conversation now, part of you is actually becoming part of me.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of, that's kind of like, I mean, when I tell it to folks who are not of the same mind, they're like, what?
Right.
So, I mean, and so you take all of the encounter, all of the relationships, and that makes up who I am. Mm-hmm. And so it gets beyond just race or gender or sexuality, but it gets to being a human being. Yeah, and we're actually in this together. So usually, folks are not of the same. I get it when you talk about terrorism. Now they get that. Mm-hmm. They get the bad side of it, but they don't get the good side of it. Mm-hmm. Because we are in this together. So whatever I do, it actually impacts more than just me.
Right.
And so to me, that's what queer is. So I take my time, grow up in the neighborhood, the transgender stuff, all the encounters I've had, and I embrace every last. And that's kind of, it can be very dangerous to certain authorities when you do that. Right. But what? That's who I am. I can't help but do that. And so I present my paper really is about that, about embracing all of who you are and really creating that, I call it an oppositional horizon. Because when you look at the normative, the norm has a horizon is based on materialism and stuff.
Right.
Right. So my hope is to get the biggest house. My hope is to get the biggest car. It's all about material. To get more power, to get all these things. Mm-hmm. The oppositional horizon is about the inner life and growing in your inner life, so you'll be satisfied on the inside. Then you won't have to do all this other stuff.
Right.
So it's a different, it's a very different way of being. I mean, in the Christian context, it might say developing the kingdom of God in you. In the Christian context.
Right.
But that's where I'm going with that paper, because the idea is, well, how do you move when you know hundreds of transgender women, in particular of color, who get killed each day? How do you move through that? Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, it's by the Spirit, going by the Spirit. Another part of making just good choices.
Right.
I had this guy today. He said, "You look beautiful." I said, "Yeah, and?" As I was getting in my car, he says, "What? Am I ugly?" "No, you're not ugly, but I gotta go. See you." So, having a good head on your shoulders, and always being in prayer, and that's for me. That's how it works, because the life, most folk know it anyway. I mean, the life of a transgender person, regardless of color, is difficult anyway. Yeah, you gotta live around talks and other folks, but even they'll say, no, it's not about that. It's a hard life.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, all the stories that I've ever heard from trans folks, regardless of race, is like, wow. And so for me, embracing all of my narrative gives me strength to go through what I need to go through. Gives strength to do what I need to do to transform the world, to transform my communities of faith and my communities of existence, what do you want to call it? And to say, yes, it is difficult. It is hard. Because a black man or a black transgender woman is right.
It's hard.
Word.
But at the same time, to know that there's more. That there's more to this. And then that's when I go back to the history component. That's when I go back to Frederick Douglass. That's when I go back to the Middle Passage. That's when I go back. And say, okay, well, and then for me as a Christian, not in the nationalistic sense, but Christian as in the Nazareth sense.
Right.
Then that's when Jesus to the cross is put in a whole different light. It's a very radical thing. And, I mean, to remove it from the colonized narrative into something that's much more decolonization. Yeah. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah. And I was just going to ask you too, do you think, thinking about that and the decolonization and changing the narrative, do you think the internet is really kind of causing an awakening for people along that line?
Oh, I do. It's kind of funny. I was talking to somebody the other day. Oh, I was in a store. That's right. I was in a store. And I was talking to some folks about the internet. And I said the internet, it's like the very first printing press that did the Gutenberg Bible. Because we were talking about the Amazon issue versus the little itty bitty guys.
Right.
And so I was saying in the context of Amazon, the reason why Amazon got issues because it's like, it's almost the same level as the first printing press. Right before that, reading and knowing word was very much a thing of privilege and royalty. Only royalty could read.
Right.
And then when they had the first printing press, oh my God, we all have access to the word. So it's that level of of issues. Now, mind you have the economic issue, but it's also the issue of privilege. So then you get to the point where who can be published?
Right.
Well, Amazon busted it wide open. Anybody can publish now.
Absolutely.
And so the internet is at first in the 21st century component. The internet is that first level of, I would call the Gutenberg Bible type of setting, where it really expanded who can take part in conversations.
Right.
And if it's utilized correctly, if it's utilized in such a way, it can really break down a lot of barriers. I think the spring, what was it, October Spring? Which one? In the Middle East, the spring?
Oh, Arab Spring, right.
Arab Spring, that was very interesting because the Arab Spring, it was a very hopeful time. And I know the guy from Google was actually over there at the time.
Right.
But also I noticed that the U.S. government recognized the power of the internet. And I'll never forget when I was over in overseas before 9/11. On the day of 9/11, it said that the U.S. government just shut the whole country down. They shut everything down. Now, if you think about that, that's kind of I get it on the one hand, but for the government to shut everything down, that's kind of like, oh, okay. The hope of the internet is that it does create transformation, critical mass, and allow people to actually speak their mind and be free. Freedom of speech. I think Ben Franklin would be so happy.
Right. He'd have a blog and stuff. I mean, he'd have a Twitter account and a blog, and he'd be on Facebook.
I know, he's like right there.
Right.
The other side of that is that the empire will strike back.
Right.
Because they realize at the same time that can put the government in jeopardy because people can start really voicing their dissatisfaction and build critical mass, and if not careful, can really tear the structure down.
Yeah. Well,
the good thing about our government is that it's strong enough the way it's constructed, even with its issues, to allow dissent, but still somehow, like Pac-Man, contain it.
Yeah.
So it's not like the Middle East where the authoritarian governments are so fearful of speech that they just want to put you in jail for having a Teletubby.
Right.
So it's in that aspect we have a pretty strong government, but it has to be balanced.
Well, I think the internet is really showing our humanity in a way because, like you said, it has this ability for us to have free speech and to see things that we didn't normally used to see before, and to really open up speech and open up ideas and allow people to see other aspects of humanity that they won't, like if somebody's sitting in a small town in Minnesota, they may not normally be able to read something from Africa or India or, other places, or, learn about other religions, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's really also showing our ugly side as well. Like we're, with things like Gamergate, with things, all this stuff around Ferguson and the race issues, and people are really starting to see, our ugliness as well as all of the positive.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's also the other thing that the government's railing against, and that our country as a whole is railing against. Like, we can't be this bad. And it's like, actually, yes, we can be.
Yes, we are. The question becomes, how do we navigate our humanity in such a way as to, transformation can be a very ugly mess.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes that's what has to happen. And so all things being consistent, right? If you get a cut on your arm, right, part of the healing process is that looking to get a scab and look really ugly. You don't even look at it.
Right.
So the way I view life is there's a certain consistency that occur. And so as much as in our civilization, we try to divorce ourselves from the nature and the natural part of life, it's the same way. So when a country goes through some serious ugly stuff, there's a process of healing. Within the process of healing, there's some really ugly stuff. But the kicker is this, and this is where I think a decolonized religion, spirituality, whatever you want to call it, can be that space of healing. Because, I mean, the U.S. has to go through this. There's no other option. It's like, okay, when you want to do it?
Right.
Okay, you got to look at the ugly stuff. You got to look at the bad stuff. It's there. It's not going anywhere. Yeah, okay, we had this today. It'll be something else later on. So at what point do we stop and look and listen to it, and then have the communities of healing there to help us through the process?
Right.
But it's got to be looked at. But for me, I put something on Facebook. I said, we create constructs so we won't see God, but eventually they fall apart and God reappears.
Absolutely.
And that's pretty much the way it happens, And I say God in a very decolonized way, because we don't know who God is. We don't know God.
Exactly.
We have ideas, but that entity that we exist in is always there to shepherd us through what needs to be done. But it requires us to look deep within and say, okay, we got a problem.
Right.
But at that point, that's when healing can begin. That's when we can really get beyond the issues of race and gender, all these different things. Because if you allow things to continue to fester, you actually do end up dying.
Right.
So,
well, I think we've just opened the wound. I think it's going to take a while before we really get to a point where healing can occur, because there's still a lot of stuff there. There's a lot of, what I've learned in my classes as collective trauma around slavery. And it affects both the African Americans who went through it and the Africans who went through it, but also the white people that went through it.
Everybody's affected by it.
Exactly. And, we haven't really gotten to a point where, I don't think we've gotten to the point where healing really can occur, but we've opened the wound and we're letting the stuff drain out.
Yeah. I think last month, the Canadians had a Truth and Reconciliation meeting up in Canada.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And the Canadian government acknowledged the issue relating to the indigenous people. And they didn't have some low level, they had high level authorities saying, okay, this is what happened.
Wow.
And if they read on the internet on Google, it's like there was an actual meeting to address the issues.
I remember reading about that.
Yeah. And then, of course, I had an opportunity while at Greenpeace to work with a woman from Germany. I think it was part of Germany. I don't know, it's Wiesbaden or Berlin. But we had a discussion about that stuff, about how the country said, well, how did we do this? We really messed up on this. So what happened? It's okay, well, that was a problem. And so actually going through the process of looking within, saying, well, okay, how do we fix this? Now for Germany, in that case, they actually stepped back for a very long time.
Right.
They didn't do anything. Like, okay, we need to chill out. Let's take a break.
Yeah.
And even when they did get involved in some peacekeeping effort, they really were cautious on how they did it.
Right.
Even when they had it in South Africa, they had a truth reconciliation in South Africa at one point. But even then, they had to tread lightly. I mean, it's still got issues, but they took time out to look.
Right.
And so it was funny. What they said, the one thing the U.S. does not do at all is reflection. We don't reflect.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we don't want to look back.
Yeah.
So, and it's problematic. And it's going to come up and bite us again.
Well, I think it already has, because, you know, one of the things that this country is founded on in our history is freedom of religion, and running from, you know, a totalitarian kind of government, you know, that said this is only one religion. And now we've got people in our government that are like, everything has to be Christian, and that it only has to be, and it has to be Christian in this specific way. And it's kind of like, you're kind of defeating the purpose of the Constitution here.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you know, you're going against what the founders wanted.
Right, exactly. And they don't get it. They don't. But a lot of it had to do with power and privilege. And it's going to take us. It's going to take us down, actually. But that's a whole different.
Yeah, that's another whole conversation, isn't it?
I mean, it's. I think that's why I do the work I do, because I said. So the guy, of course, I was over on Polk Street, over in the city, over in San Francisco.
Right.
And I guess they just figured out another woman in the night. And so the guy thought he kind of witnessed to. And he was giving me all these scriptures and stuff like that. And then I said, cool. As far as I said, well, I'm a minister and I go to City of Refuge. And that he didn't know how to handle that. And then I said, okay, yeah, but do you know God? I mean, I took it beyond scripture, but do you know God? And I never did see him. He just like walked away.
Yeah. I've had similar conversations with people, and they just get really confused. Like, what do you mean? And then they either stick around and try to talk to me or try to convince me otherwise, or they like that guy with you. They just walk away, kind of going, "Huh?" with their brains exploded a bit.
Yeah. That's because they have to creating that space, so people have to access a different thought process. Mm-hmm. And they may not do it in your presence, but when you're at the dinner table at the local Burger King or whatever, like, okay, how do I process it? In fact, I did have one guy after come back to me, and I didn't know he was looking at me or anything, but he said, I never met a transgender person like you. I didn't know that could be. Every now and then, somebody will come back and acknowledge, okay, I had to really change my thinking. I couldn't figure it out.
Yeah. And what I think too is, doing that kind of work. And like I said, this is kind of what I hope my podcast will do. Doing that work, like, they may not change overnight, but you've planted a seed. Like,
that's the idea.
It's like that little voice in the back of their head going, maybe what you think is wrong. Maybe this is wrong. Maybe I should think of it a different way. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the key, just that little voice of maybe not,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you said planting seed, because I really learned how to embrace the farm narrative. Because it is about spreading seed. It is. And sometimes if enough rain occurs on the soil, it'd be totally cool for the seed. Because then there's a place of nourishment already there for the seed to grow. It depends. But then I've also encountered really, really dry land. Just barren. And the seed cannot, what can a seed do in dry, barren land? It's kind of, but you put it there because at the other point, and I've got in trouble for this, but using mysticism as a means to describe certain things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know that.
So from a mystical point of view, the land might look dry, but then could actually be very fertile. I mean, from a mystical point of view, where the person's spirit is actually ready to receive. They may look completely not with it, but when they receive the seed, something occurs. I can't describe it. I can't really put it, but you know what I mean? Like it's there. Yeah. So spreading the seed is a lot of what transformation work is.
Yeah. I like that parable too. Like, I really like the parable of the mustard seed. And I did a sermon where I interpreted that as, even though, they talk about how, the seeds are like, if the seeds are in good soil, then it'll grow. If it's in bad soil, it won't. And I kind of challenge that because, I almost minored in botany.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And, one of the things is that seeds of plants, the roots are pretty powerful. And, even a seed on a rock can grow and grow and is strong enough to break the rock.
Right.
You can see that in you can see trees that just split rocks in half. And I think that's also a powerful metaphor there because, ideas are like that. Ideas can move things like that and move mountains. Exactly.
I have. So from time to time, I go out to Castro Valley. You know Jonathan.
Oh yeah, yep, Jonathan Thunderword. He's great.
Yeah, so I go out to Castro Valley, and sometimes I like either looking at animals or looking at the farmland because it's different than being out here in urban Richmond or whatever.
Right.
Because the seed, I don't know, metaphor, whatever, it's such a powerful thing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, so I go out, for me, the seed might be just being present at a city council meeting.
Right.
So it was funny because I was at a city council meeting, and I'm among all these business people and folks who were pretty much in the norm.
Yeah.
And I went up there to talk about the increase in the minimum wage here in Richmond. Mm-hmm. Right? And they didn't know. They like, huh? So they're like, okay, I hear what you're saying, but I don't get it.
Right.
But it's like, but it's being there and really saying, okay, this is what it's all about. So you're planting too. So you plant the seed of diversity, but you also planted the seed of what I would call justice, for lack of a better word.
Right.
And then some folks came back to me because they had never seen a transgender person go up there and do that.
Right.
But once again, it doesn't happen every day, but it did happen that particular day. But I guess I'm pretty much about planting seed because I realize I can't do all the work.
No.
But I have to be willing to do the work. So that folks who are not on the face of Vanity Fair or Time Magazine, they can have hope also. Because I had this one kid, and it still relates to the seed. So I went to a nail shop in Berkeley, and I was getting the nails on, of course. I had the little kid. The little kid came in with his mother. She said, "Okay, son, what do you want? You want to get your nail polish? What do you want to do?" He said, "I'll just get a manicure." He was like maybe 7-8 years old.
Aw.
And but I could see in him something was going on, and his mother was very much aware of what was going on. He just kept looking and looking at me. I like he wanted me to ask me a question, but he didn't know how.
Uh-huh.
But it's that providing this space of hope. So spreading the seed actually gives a very hopeful space for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
They may not know how to articulate what they want or what that looks like, But that seed provides a space of access. Like, okay, well, I guess I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
It is possible. But if I'm not being authentic, if I'm just trying to, then that's no good.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, spreading seed is critical. And the growth may not, somebody else will come and do the other component too.
Mm-hmm.
So we all take different turns. I might spread seed here. I might water it another space. It's fascinating when you really think about what that means. And then, but then that becomes challenging to folks in authority who are in the norm, who don't get it, who feel threatened by how I spread seed.
Yeah, absolutely.
I still remember going to Capitol Hill, and I went to Barbara Lee's office with some other folks, and they were saying how just before we got there's some other folks who were very much not where we were. Right. They were like, there's one Congress lady who was talking really against transgender people. Mm-hmm. Just really going off and just bad, just bad.
Right.
So the forces on the other side are very much engaged in this cultural warfare because they spread seed too.
Yeah, absolutely. But it seems like their seeds are, for lack of a better word, losing.
Yeah, it is. They are losing.
Yeah, because it just seems like we're getting more and more, and and I think the internet is helping with this too. More and more of that kind of anger and hate speech just seems to be losing with people in general.
Yeah, it is.
Like, people are just like, why are you being a jerk to somebody? You don't need to be a jerk to anybody.
Oh yeah. And that's proven because they are now going over to other countries because they feel they've lost over here.
Right.
So they go to the countries in Africa. Certain countries in Africa, they go to those countries.
Right.
Or they try to spread the venom over to Russia.
Oh, Lord, right.
Because they say, well, we've lost the U.S. They're done. We can't do anything about them. Mm-hmm. And so they look at Fox News, whatever.
Right.
And then it's pretty sad.
Yeah.
And I say if there is an apocalypse or end of days, it's about the white imagination. Now, yeah, the white imagination, yeah, that might have its end of days, but the earth is not going anywhere.
Yeah,
so
right.
that's the only problem. Yeah, the civilization based on the white men, that may be going somewhere else.
Right.
But the rest of us are not going anywhere. It'll just be a transformation. That's all. To me, that's all the apocalypse is about. Transformation. It's nothing more to me. And I've been taught otherwise, but I don't really believe that.
Yeah.
I do believe it's all about transformation. That change occurs. Mm-hmm. And apocalypse comes as we lose power and prestige.
Right.
So, yeah, something makes sense. Yeah.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, but unfortunately we're running out of time. So, yeah, I know. It's just, you get to talking and it just seems like it takes a minute, So if people would like to get in touch with you and talk to you more about what we've talked about on the show, or to find out more about your ministry, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
You can contact me at Monica Joy and the number 9 at gmail.com. Mm-hmm. My other email is monicajoy44 at yahoo.com.
Okay.
Or you can hit me up on Facebook through the Transgender Scholar. I'm on Facebook that way. Mm-hmm. And also A Different Imagination for a Just and Sustainable Humanity. That's my other. So, yeah.
Right. And you have a blog, too?
Yeah, it's called the Transgender Scholar. That's
right.
So the blog is called the Transgender Scholar, and the Facebook is called the Trenches. So it's two.
Gotcha. Well, we'll have links to all of that in the show notes, and so that people can find it easily. And so I'd like to really thank you for being on.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, Gina. I enjoyed it.
Awesome. Me too. I'd like to thank Monica for joining us. As always, if you have comments, questions, or would like to read the show notes, you can go to thisweekinheresy.com. You can also subscribe to the show via iTunes or the Stitcher app, or follow us on Twitter at TWIH Podcast. And if you can, please consider supporting this podcast through patreon.com. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.